Hey everybody, welcome back to The Quest for the Bestest. It's the podcast from Backlot Banter where we review every single Palme d'Or winner, and today we're talking about The Mattei Affair. It's from 1972. It's an Italian movie directed by Francesco Rosi, starring Gian Maria Volonté, Luigi Squarzina, and Peter Baldwin. Maybe an American. This is a rather unique film, I would actually posit, and I'm excited to hear what my three co-hosts have to say about it. I've got my own thoughts, but we'll get to that when we get to it. I gotta remind you all of what we talked about last time because we were not so far away from Italy. We were in Britain talking about the movie If, with 4 dots after the title. We thought it was interesting somewhat. It got a 7.1 out of 10, and we decided that that would be spot number 20 on the list, below The White Ribbon and above Dancer in the Dark. And so if you want to find out about a movie involving a school shooting, but not really about school shootings whatsoever, go watch that review and educate yourself on a movie that, you know, maybe you missed when it came out many decades ago.
The way you described it encompasses all films.
Well, we are going to put another film on the list after Abram gives us a little treat from our audience. A comment, mayhaps, from a viewer is trying to get our attention down in that box below every video we publish.
This is a little Christmas treat in our stockings, in our collective Backlot Banter stockings.
I am very pleased to announce that this week John Tour is back in the comments section.
Let's go!
Yes!
Return of the King.
And there's really a lot in this comment that I'm excited to talk about here. So we begin with this. Hey guys, I saw this movie If when I lived in the UK for a year 20 years ago. I don't remember it much, and I was probably too young to appreciate it. It's amazing that this stiff conservative country at the same time can be so ahead of its time. The movie could not have been made in the US in that day. I also accidentally saw another British movie from 1968 the other week. Robert Aldrich's The Killing of Sister George, which is absolutely hilarious and surprisingly groundbreaking. You guys should see it. I can't rate If. I'd have to rewatch it, but Sister George was a solid 9 out of 10.
I think more people should do that in their comments. Be like, look, totally unrelated, but here's a score for a diff.
But here's the most important part. Here's the most important part of the comment.
It is the most important part.
We have, at this point, I would say it's not an exaggeration to say 2.5 to 3 years ago, embarked on a journey with John Tour for us to hear his thoughts on his first experience with the Star Wars saga. And we have an update after how many episodes from John Tour.
An untold number
here.
Oh my God, I can't wait.
In other news, I can report that I am fully up to date with the Star Wars movies, and Rogue One is obviously the best one, winky face. Now, here's what I have to say, John Tour. If you have, I'm going to call it a creative opinion. If you have such a creative opinion for your number one spot, I need the full list. I don't care if you've never seen The Mattei Affair, you probably haven't. Under this video, give me all of the Star Wars films ranked, and I will...
Best to worst.
Best to worst. I will derail next week's episode. Doesn't matter what it is. And we'll go through your list one by one, because you deserve it. Thank you for writing in. It's good to hear from you.
I mean, hey,
if we somehow get Schindler's List again, Abram will be like, look, it's time.
I like Rogue One more than most, but to rank it at the top is truly something
That
special.
is.
I need to know.
I need to know too. We might just have to do a little My Star Wars show here on Quest for a couple minutes.
Of course.
Next time around, if John Tour provides. Okay.
That's
wow.
right.
What a great comment. Thanks. As always, if you have thoughts on anything, be it world politics, be it your diet, be it the movie we're talking about, write it down in the comments and we will read it and potentially talk about it on a future episode. So thanks, John Tour. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's hit this. Tanner, would you give us a little plot synopsis of the Mattei Affair?
Yes, I suppose
While Tanner's
I will.
doing that, I'm going to go under my desk and plug in my computer because it is not plugged in. Just I'm gonna disappear. Don't judge me too harshly.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Okay. So the film The Mattei Affair is about Enrico Mattei, who held many positions throughout his life, but is most notably remembered for, and especially most of this film is made up of, his time as the president of ENI, which is an Italian state-owned company, an energy company, oil and gas largely. And his predilection was to make Italy an energy independent state, And really, he travels the world, sort of trying to make Italy both that energy independent state, but also making deals with the Soviet government or newly installed governments that have overthrown dictatorships and colonial control. He is making these quick and fast deals with all of these oil producing countries, sort of shrugging off the understood hierarchy of power that exists within the U.S. and U.K. controlled oil companies, which he refers to as the Seven Sisters. And in doing this, he may be, toying with the geopolitical order as it comes to oil and energy. So, he mysteriously dies in a plane crash. And this film also just spends a lot of time dissecting that plane crash, the circumstances surrounding it, in a pseudo-documentary style, breaking the fourth wall. The director of the film speaks to us on camera about what happened there, and also about his friend who was investigating that plane crash, who was actually disappeared, kidnapped, and most likely murdered by the Sicilian mafia for looking into it. It's a very metatextual, investigative piece that I'm excited to talk about with you guys.
The hierarchy of power in the oil economy is about to change.
Well, it was attempted. It was attempted.
Abrams spent 5 minutes cooking that one up.
Tanner said hierarchy of power.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, thanks, Tanner, for that description. Abrams, since you have such wonderful humor, why don't you lead us off and tell us what you thought of the movie?
I don't know. I'm very conflicted on this film because academically, I think it's quite fascinating. I thought of Nomadland, which we reviewed quite a while ago when I was watching this film, in the ways that it is blending documentarian filmmaking and real people, not just in the Italian neo-realist sense, but just real people into this fictionalized narrative. I thought that was actually quite provocative and quite interesting filmmaking. I'm also very interested in the film's political situation. I'm very interested in a lot of its choices, but I think that at the same time, for me, it paints such a specific portrait of Mattei in our central role that it ends up, in my view, feeling quite repetitive and like it drags quite a bit, particularly as you get further into the film, which to me is a little bit of a missed opportunity because, to build on what you were saying, Tanner, I did a little bit of reading into the film because I was interested. Unfortunately, I was not, too up to date on my Italian oil politics prior to watching.
Yeah.
So
You're forgiven. You're forgiven.
We're gonna get some hardcore Italian oil historians in the chat. Be like, you guys don't get it.
Yeah.
The journalist who was disappeared, likely by the mob, was disappeared in the process of making this film, which is a really interesting wrinkle on that particular part of the narrative. And so I find it to be a really interesting amalgam of styles. I find our central character to be quite an interesting figure politically, but I just don't know if the watching experience is as stimulating as the academic experience or the formal experience for me by any stretch.
Tucker, you want to go next?
Ooh, this is a rough one. Ladies and gentlemen, I fought for my life while watching The Mattei Affair because I think this is one of the most boring movies ever had to review for this show. I think that it is well made technically. I actually liked quite a bit of the production design and the cinematography, and everyone in their roles is doing the best with what they're given. But this film is, I think Abrams' word specific is a good word to use because it is so hyper specific that I found it incredibly unapproachable and incredibly hard to find a footing in narratively, because this film that is really, it is about one guy. We learn so little about him personally that I found it entirely impossible to engage with the narrative or whatever potential stakes there are. But also, this film, even as it goes along, and introduces this concept of the frame narrative and the mystery of his death and things, we don't actually learn much about these things as the movie goes on and the movie ends. And I'm like, I don't know what happened in any part of this movie. Especially as this film relates to the oil politics of the time. That's obviously what the vast majority of the film's runtime is concerned with. There are so many sequences that feel so similar to me of meeting a guy and telling him about the statistics of piping and the workers and the money, and that doesn't teach me anything about this movie because it's so dry in its presentation and it's so specific in the area of expertise that you need to be privy to understand these conversations that I found it totally alienating, and I was dipping in and out of consciousness for this entire movie. I mean, I really disliked this movie. It is a strong dislike for me.
So, it's describing you like falling asleep during a movie as dipping in and out of consciousness does give it a level of severity that I appreciate. It's as if you're blacking out watching the movie as opposed to just like nodding off. It's like you might need to go to the doctor. I don't know.
You're not conscious when you're like asleep, right?
Correct, but
so, there's really not much of a difference.
It's true. It's just an understanding of terminology.
Yes.
But Timo, please continue with your thoughts.
I also dipped in and out of consciousness towards the end of this movie. But I think I share more of Abrams' thoughts in general about my viewing experience. Yes, it bored me. Yes, I struggled to stay awake towards the end of it. But by and large, it was something that I felt as approaching it, getting right in the beginning. Ooh, this is up my alley. This is geopolitics. This is, oil. This is like things that I am interested in my own like studies of the world. But the film.
The camera has never panned to Timo's oil collection that he has on the wall.
all my derricks and gauges and valves and stuff.
This collection of crude.
The ways that this film tells its story are both very interesting, but a little ineffectual, I would say. I think that the way that Abram brings up the similarities to Nomadland of this blending of the two like a documentary style, but also this is fictionalized narrative is very unique and really like puts this film in kind of a nice spot, despite the actual subject matter not having a lot of reveal to it. I think, like Tucker said, I didn't get a great picture or find myself at the end of the film having a good understanding as to like what I thought happened. In a movie that sets up a big mystery like this, that has some sort of true crime elements and has, investigative elements, even if you don't know in real life what happened, you do have an obligation as a filmmaker to allow the viewers to make their own choices, which requires supplying enough information that conclusion can be easily drawn by the audience. And I think that this film is like just a tiny bit short on the info. And to me, that comes across not as an error in writing, but as in this movie's not made all that after. It was not produced very far after the crash happened. Like you said, there's...
It was before.
Really?
Yeah, I presume you're referring to like the OPEC oil crisis or whatever.
The plane crash wherein.
Oh, the plane crash. Okay, I thought I was getting way ahead of you. Sorry, Timo.
Timo. The real life events that inspire the film don't seem all that disconnected.
The Italian oil historian. That's actually kind of a tongue twister. The Italian oil historian has entered the chat and it's stared at.
I'm sorry.
So while I think I am academically interested in this movie, I think the political situation of our main character and of the film as a whole is interesting to discuss, and we will probably have some fun doing that. The actual movie is probably less fun than what we're doing right now.
Yeah. I think it's interesting to hear all you guys sort of expound on this, because I totally understand where you guys are coming from, because in a moment to moment, scene by scene, the way that we engage with 99% of movies, this movie is not exactly exciting or engaging on that level. It is, in theory, a biopic about Enrico Mattei, and it's very interesting from that standpoint, because as Tucker was pointing out, you are given nothing personally about his personal life. It is all things that were like in public record, essentially. And from that standpoint, it serves as more of a documentary, but with an actor portraying the character, the person, for the vast majority of the film. And then it obviously weaves in its more documentarian elements at certain points, certain high points throughout the film. But a large part of it is this biopic thing that is more documentary than anything else. It is film investigation, I believe, is what Federico Rosa refers to it as, or Francesco Rossi refers to it as. it is keeping all the personal elements of Enrico at an arm's length,
Definitely.
in favor of sort of trying to display his importance to Italy and the world stage at this time. And yeah, I can't say that it like super personally affected me, but I was definitely more fascinated as on a journalistic level, I'll say.
Sure.
Mhm.
I think that's totally fair. And when
Yeah.
Abrams started talking about the metatextual elements of this film, I think that is a very reasonable way to approach the film, and to think that it is unique and compelling in a textual way, in a filmmaking way, in a way that, especially for the time, for people who are more familiar with the goings on and had
Of course.
heard of Enrico Mattei, I can understand it being similar to some of these other like biopic-y movies that we've reviewed in the past. Like, for the time, yeah, I can understand like it feeling very compelling, and being sort of like a big screen realization of this thing that in the time probably a lot of people were talking about. I can't say that for sure because I've never heard of any of this
Certainly
conflict.
in
but-
Italy at the
Yeah,
time,
true.
obviously.
Yeah. But I do have to say that that is also why I think that it, for me, is very hard to extrapolate that out to a person that is distanced from the time and culture and people of which the context of this film was made. I am not Italian. I was not alive in the 1970s. I know nothing about oil, politics, history. These things are totally foreign to me, and in some ways, literally. And that is a big distancing factor for me. Is I have no groundwork. I mean, this movie could have been not subtitled, and I don't think I wouldn't have gotten much more out of it, or much less out of it. Like,
Yeah,
it really
sure.
was gobbledygook to me for so much of it.
It's an interesting question to ask, I think, of a movie like this, as to whether or not that is a criticism or a skill issue on our behalf. Because like I said,
Yeah.
I had to stop and pause the movie and pull up Wikipedia and make sure I just had a cursory understanding of what was going on before I continued. And I think it's an interesting challenge with this show in general of, I think when we're looking at a lot of Oscar winners, we're sort of less critical of the notion that, oh, well, this movie is sort of takes tenets of American culture or history or politics as fact that doesn't need explaining.
Mhm.
And so when I watch this, a thought I was having is, well, these stylistic techniques, these academic techniques, these merging of genre, would we, all four of us, find it more compelling if this exact style of movie and filmmaking were employed to tell the story of a popular American business magnate?
Rockefeller or
Yeah.
whatever,
Yeah.
who gets name dropped in this movie.
Maybe.
And I
Yeah,
think
maybe.
I think that, Tucker, you raised a good point that I was thinking about a lot when I was watching, because it was a real challenge. But I think the difference in our viewing, it was that for me it was sort of an invitation to learn about this political idea that I do think is in some ways quite universal and still prescient, this notion of privatization versus nationalization of an industry.
Mhm.
Obviously, as it pertains to healthcare or various things, that is still a politically relevant topic in American culture. So I found it tricky, of course, in not knowing any of this Italian context, but I also found some elements of it that felt prescient nonetheless. And I really was wondering, man, would this be, in my view, a very moving style of filmmaking if it were tackling a different subject?
Yeah, I mean, I think your point about the style of this filmmaking is really important. The way that the film opens and then leads after kind of the opening scene of this frantic investigation, the crash happens and they're all there, and we get this, I think, very well done sequence right at the beginning of the film, in which we are trying to just see what happened and uncover information, and then we pull back, and now we're in media land, and we see this row of TV screens, and we see the journalists trying to come up with questions. I was watching it with my dad here on the TV behind me, and he pointed out to me that, like, there's a hilarious shot or an edit in which we have journalists talking and asking questions, and then it cuts, and there's an excavator digging in the mud. And I think that this film has so many moments of this where it's like throwing sharp, incisive political commentary that some of it is lost to us because it is about the Italian situation, which we don't know. But other parts of it, I think, are real applicable not just in the state versus private, which I think Italy is so unique in this situation, and that is kind of one of the major themes that I was picking up on and trying to sink my teeth into throughout the film, but also the Cold War situation and post-colonial situation. Mattei, not Malay. I kept Googling Malay when I was trying to look up this movie and it wouldn't return any results. And then I realized I was spelling it wrong. But like the way that he's like fighting against the French and there's the competitions against the Americans, and how this film almost centers oil in the Cold War as like the most important thing that was going on in like world socio-economic situation. Like the whole throw everything that matters in this damn earth together, and what is at the center of it? Oh, it's oil. And so that was all very interesting. And the filmmaking techniques also showed up a lot, that in a way that I thought was unique and cool, with these TV screens cutting to, random cutaway to two characters we've never seen before discussing a piece of relevant information to the scene prior. That all works, but there's something about the material here. I think Abrams right that say this were about Rockefeller or Vanderbilt, or damn me for saying this, but about Musk. Like if it were that, would we get so much more out of it because we have all this context for these figures? And the Italians probably had a ton of context for this guy because they were around him and hearing the controversies that this film goes over. All these, it isn't always so specific about what the controversy is, but it does reference many, many, many times in which, the lawmakers are unhappy with what Mattei is doing, or, the public thinks that he's doing something bad here. And then it, cuts back to him and he's like, no, I am an operator of a state-owned enterprise and this is what I must do. It's all very foreign to us Americans. And so I think it's a little hard to grasp, but show my hand here. I'd like a little more state-owned enterprise in my country. And so like it puts a useful debate into my mind about like, is it any different? I think is part of the thing that this film is trying to really get at the center, is like, is a state-owned conglomerate corporation really all that different from a privately owned one when you have a guy with insane amounts of power at the top? Is it corrupt? Is it not? Well, I think the film is trying to make the point that, like, yeah, it is, even if he's out there proclaiming all these benefits for the people and the 60,000 workers that he indirectly employs. But at the same time, how does he get the deals? He's got to go wheel and deal. And so these elements of Mattei's character are quite interesting, but it's just rather thick to get through. It's just not all that. It is present, but you got to be right there with the movie and paying very close attention to it, I think, to grasp a lot of it. And if you're like me and falling asleep in the last third, like, it's a little difficult.
Well, the thing that I found, I think, so frustrating as the film was wrapping up, and, well, I said I don't feel like I learned much more about Enrico Mattei. I think we can certainly get into that in him as a character as portrayed in this film. And I was struggling with a larger situation, and then also the frame narrative. All three of these things, I think, are very difficult to parse as a viewer, and I didn't feel like I learned too much more as the film was going. But there was one element as the film was wrapping up that I was keyed into that I appreciated quite a bit, and that is the element of Mattei's power and the way that he uses that over masses of people to convince them that what he's doing is the right thing to do. And specifically,
the media,
etc. That is a great parallel, like him being an oil mogul, parallel, you're right, to media and to politicians. But the scene in which he's in Sicily and they've just discovered methane, and he's talking to this giant crowd of people who are cheering his name and like yelling things out to him as he's standing over this like, they've got Italian flags and there's confetti and they're all like, this is going to make so much work.
He's doing like a stump speech.
And this is going to get rid of poverty in Sicily. And suddenly I was like, well, this is what the movie is about. Like, the way that you can use this sort of power to influence people, and how in some way also he's working it up for the media, for the press, for like how much of this is actually true. But the thing that I think frustrated me most is in that sequence, I saw where this film can be universal. I saw where many of the themes can coalesce into something I think very humanly powerful. But to the most of the movie's runtime, we don't see almost any normal people. We're in a lot of boardrooms. We're in a lot of dry scenarios where there's translation. We don't see the effect on the workers or the people that this oil thing is impacting outside of like fleeting glances like the thing on the oil rig. But that to me, I think, is where I was most frustrated with the film. Like, there is this humanitarian impact, the cultural impact of this that I think is really what this film is trying to level at, is the way that all these backroom dealings can then spider out and affect culture and people's lives and the economy. But we don't get to see a lot of it. And so for me, the movie was a lot of tell, don't show. It was talk about people in the boardrooms, talk about the statistics, how much money we're going to spend on this, how is this going to impact the economy. But it isn't until a couple of sequences, and especially that one in Sicily, where we actually are able to see what is happening and get a sense of the emotional, like, real life impact that these wheeling and dealings are having. And that, like, and I think that's also why, in retrospect, I dislike the movie even stronger, is because I'm like, that's what it was missing.
Yeah.
The heart, the personality, the human impact of this, rather than a dry guy I don't know a lot about talking to dry guys I know even less about.
I think your point of
that's
tell, don't show, I really agree with that. That's the mode this movie operates in. And oh boy, did I hear not to do that a lot during film school.
I think it's a really interesting point, and something that obviously as a filmmaker you would bump up against, because Enrico Mattei, as we come to know him in the film, he is not a politician. He's not running for public office. He is appointed by the Italian government. He is the head of a state-owned corporation.
Yeah.
So he doesn't need to do these stump speeches, and I think perhaps Rossi is getting at the fact that towards the end of his career, as he was getting more and more radical and more powerful, he was evolving into this political figure, and that's why he
had to be gotten rid of.
He stuck his head out and got bit off.
Yeah.
Does it even matter how he got killed? Like, honestly, the film doesn't answer that question, and then maybe the point isn't that we need to know why or what mechanisms he got killed. It was that, he got too radical, he got too powerful, he wasn't elected. I mean, the mafia is not elected, but they needed to kill him.
Yeah, well, I feel like it's the film, or Rossi sort of takes it as understanding that, some of the material evidence is perhaps missing in this case, and there's the allusion to the journalist who maybe found something that was groundbreaking, that was sort of shake Italy to its core or something. I think is something that's mentioned in the film about this particular audio tape that he uncovered, and he is disappeared presumably by the mafia as well. But Rossi sort of takes as understanding that the mafia killed this guy most likely at the behest of American-owned or Western-owned oil companies.
Mm-hmm. By the Corleone family.
Yes.
Yes, literally.
Yes. But no, I think that the function there of how he is killed is obviously what the film opens on, but most of it is painting for you this portrait of how he became a threat to the specific people, the suits at the top of the list, the suits in the ivory towers, not through stump speeches, working his way through the Italian countryside, getting the people riled up, but by making these actionable bureaucratic moves behind the scenes in the boardrooms, bringing these guys to the oil fields and describing the actions that he's going to take. That is the radicalism that he's pushing. And I also think that Rossi paints an interesting portrait of Mattei not as like a left-wing political saint. Yeah. Like, he has his drawbacks.
He's like a corporate character flaws. He's like totally about
of course he
making
is.
money, making deals, like getting the business where he wants it.
He has no like political partisanism to him. he's making deals with the Soviet communists and also like the fascist leaders of the theocratic fascist leaders of Iran, and also like the newly not elected, but the newly appointed government of like Algiers that recently overthrew the colonialism of France and everything like that.
Yeah, I think that this like geopolitical situation, which is I guess what the middle bit of the movie is really trying to talk about, puts the whole film in this very like it's progressive for the time that it's coming out, in this like he's pretty much anti-colonial. He engages in imperialism by the, trying to extract, but he speaks a lot of words about how, he really wants the benefit, that all these other countries come in.
The oil should be owned by the people who, by the people who it's under their feet.
Yes. Film does not provide any evidence to say that is beyond just words, but
right.
As a character who speaks a ton in this movie, I think we do have to listen to what his ideology of business is, and it's very tied to this. I don't know. It's tied to something in his past. There is this opening bit about the first exploration in the Po Valley of the methane that has some ties to the Mussolini and the fascists of Germany and Italy, that I don't know how much that ties into later on in the film, but I think it's important. I just am not quite drawing the connection to his displayed ideology later on in the film.
Yeah.
I really found the sequence where he's at the banquet to be quite interesting, where he's sort of laughing at, but also bragging about this position he holds in the larger Italian culture and politics, where he makes foreign policy, or jokes about how Italy itself has no foreign policy. And I think what's interesting about the film is that something like, in my very little bit of reading did about him, his brokering of an oil deal with the Soviet Union was so incendiary that the US and NATO viewed him as a real radical political threat. And so there's, I think, this larger picture beyond the geopolitical picture we get in the film that would have been interesting to see, but we don't see. What we get instead is this man who makes these very consequential decisions, and we only see how he feels about them. And I think that that's a very interesting choice, because the film is quite interested in journalism, in history, and we get people who look at Mattei from a journalistic and a retrospective lens at different points in the film, and these meta elements. But what we don't get a lot of is a lot of understanding of how his decisions were shaping the globe, or moreover, how other large imperial powers like the US were concerned with him. We get a little bit of it,
but from
I don't
like the
think
French perspective, not really from the American one.
Yeah, and so it's a challenging place, I think, to put the film, because on one hand, I find this sort of metatextual journalistic element of the film to be its strongest point, but yet the lens of the film is so concerned with this almost like day in the lifestyle journalism of, I spent a week with Mattei and he flew me to these places and I sat with him in these deals and everything. And I don't think the film quite reconciles these two things. It's real interest in illustrating the man and his principles through particular instances, and this much larger political context that I think is not aptly addressed in the film. And I think that if it was, this would be a more complete, but also more engaging picture of his political ramifications on the world around him.
Yeah, that's, again, it goes to on a different way, the tell, don't show. There's a lot of talk and a lot of boardroom meetings or references in which people discuss the fact that other countries, other powers don't like this. They're scared of what he's doing. He's having an impact in his way. And I'm like, look, I'm not an oil guy. I've never laid an oil pipe. I've never.
You're from Texas, though. Don't you all have your own derricks and drills and whatnot?
I mean, naturally.
I do. I don't know what you're on about.
Yeah.
But to be honest, as someone who doesn't know a lot about how the oil system works, especially not in the 70s and especially not in Italy. I mean, this is like, I'm like 6 layers removed from being able to like actually understand the workings of it. I find it very difficult to understand how he's having this impact, why the US or France or insert other power or country or governmental person is upset by the things that he's doing, the ways in which he's actually impacting things or doing things differently. He is presented, and I believe he was, approaching this from a radical way and kind of changing the system in a way that a lot of people were frustrated. But again, it's a lot of talk.
Yeah.
I don't know what he did to do these things or how it was different from the established system. And yeah, it's because I'm outside of the time, culture, place, and knowledge, but the film does not provide almost any context within its own runtime for someone external to the context to be able to actually understand the impact of what this character is doing. And so to me, it just felt very weightless. It felt very ethereal. I'm like, I'm sure what he's doing has an impact. I have no idea what it is.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the idea of this like radical position of him to get on my high horse, on my stump for a moment, is this like
there we go
energy independence that Abram brought up at the beginning, that the idea that Italy could be independent in its energy production was an unsatisfactory idea for the more powerful Western players of America and France. And so the ultimate consequence of him being killed is like the big outcome. But for these other players, and I was thinking about this while watching that, like, America is going to really hate it if you make a deal with the Soviets in which their oil is cheaper than the Soviets' oil is cheaper than the Americans. Like, they are going to be livid about that. And the French are going to be livid when you supply the rebels that are killing their soldiers with weapons and money and the ability to, like, fuel their tanks. Like, that geopolitical situation was not clear, but at least understandable for me. And at least with my context, I was able to get something out of it and see this figure as a interesting and, something I just didn't know anything about this before watching the film.
For me, it's not a far cry. It's not it's not a huge logical leap for me for when Mattei calls the Seven Sisters, or I guess the Seven Sisters are the oil producing countries that he's talking about. When he calls like the American and to a certain extent British oil companies, when he calls them bullies that are looking to exert colonial control over Middle Eastern countries, I'm like, I know.
You're right. That's how it is.
Hey, same as it ever was, baby. And exactly. And yeah, when and he is trying to sort of nudge his way into this established order, the hierarchy of power that is very closely guarded by American private industry, who, hey, believe it or not, doesn't like giving up a lot of leeway to new guys entering the solar system.
Especially if they have like
a
legalized monopoly over their own production in their own country.
Especially if they are nationalized. If they are a nationalized corporation, which Mattei represents, private industry in America is like, well, let's not give people across the globe any funny ideas now, shall we? And no, I think that the political speeches that Mattei gives are quite interesting. They get more prevalent, especially in a wider reach as the film goes on. And I think that's a conscious decision on the part of Rossi as well. That most of the movie, and this is why it's not super engaging either, is him one-on-one talking to people. Maybe he'll be in a boardroom here or there. But as we get into the closing 20-30 minutes is when he gets that long table of people that he is giving a super impassioned speech to, where he drops the bar. I transformed Italy from a country of song and dance to an industrial power. Mao was right.
Reading that line as a subtitle was real funny.
Yeah. And then almost immediately after that is kind of his final day, his final moment, his final speech. The speech in Sicily that Tucker was talking about, where it's the people of Sicily. He has fully branched out, and his impact is being felt finally by the people of Italy. And he's like, no more poverty. Your boys, your sons, your daughters, they're not going to have to travel to Germany or France for work. They're going to come here. We're going to keep it all in Italy, baby. Italy first. And then they kill him.
I think, and it's obviously there's an impulse to be like, we're American. I don't think there's been any doubt about that ever in the history of this show.
Let's check.
Yeah, check your
Yes.
pulse. Yeah, you can feel the eagle in
No,
there.
I felt the red blood.
Felt the eagle in there.
yeah.
Good.
I feel the heart disease coming on. Oh yeah, we're American.
Better.
But I think it's not just that we want a more Americanized lens into the narrative, but that what Mattei is saying and doing has this wide-reaching effect that I wish we had seen more of. Another example from that scene that I found very compelling is this notion that I forget what conflict he's talking about, but he's talking about how he has guys defending his oil.
Oh, this is the
drilling sites.
Sinai conflict in '56.
Yeah.
Is like Israel versus Egypt and some other Arab nations trying.
Sure.
They're vying over control of the Sinai Peninsula, an oil-producing region of this here Earth.
And he says that they're there. He's got people there with guns that have ENI on them, not UN. I think that's what he says.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah.
And again, this is where I go back to my interest in the filmmaking and feel a disjunction between the material and the format, because I think about the ways that we will cut to what appear to just simply be television broadcast or interviews from a completely different mode that have just been put into the film, which I found very compelling. I would have loved if there was more of this intertextual dialogue with news reporting or interviews that reckon with some of these claims he's making, because I think then we get a better picture of the impact that he's having. But I feel like we've talked about this pillar of the film a lot. I also want to talk about the visuals of the film, because Tucker and I exchanged a couple messages while he was watching. Tucker, you should talk about the shot, because there's one really astounding shot in this movie.
There's a couple of good ones, but Tucker, which one do you like?
Well, do you guys agree that this shot of a desert with a flame, what is it, a methane,
Like a
yeah,
40
it's
foot
like
tall
derrick.
plume of flame
Yeah.
in the
yeah,
a classic
crazy
There
shot.
Will Be Blood situation.
Yeah. It was
Yeah,
awesome.
No, definitely.
Yeah, I mean,
It
Yeah.
was sick.
it's piggyback.
It is currently the background cover image I have for the film on Letterboxd.
Yeah, it's a good pick.
Yeah,
It's a good
it's
pick.
It's beautiful imagery.
and
Well-
it's practical. There's no way.
Of course it
no
is.
way
Yeah,
it's
of
not
course it is.
practical. So we just I just love seeing that large amount of real flame.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Check
And
check
for
the small
me,
note in the background.
Yeah. He's excited about it.
Uh-huh.
For me, the visuals were the part that the film kept me the most engaged. I found that there was a consistent effort in the production design and in the cinematography and the framing to keep things as dynamic as they can be in the relatively limited situations that we find
Mhm.
ourselves in within this film. And to the production design and the way that it's framed, it was a lot of these really interesting 70s corporate wood paneled walls and like stark blues and browns and grays and a little touch of green. And anytime we were set up a wide frame of these rooms, and it was really crisp, because I was watching this. To everyone watching, there is a version of this movie on YouTube that is fully restored, and
Yeah.
it looks fantastic.
Looks crisp as hell.
And that to me was by far the biggest strength of this movie. So I was always engaged by the way it looked in the production. I'm like, I haven't really seen a movie that looks like this before. So good on you.
I got two. I got two visual moments that I think really are astounding. Aside from the oil derrick one that Tucker brought up, one comes towards the beginning of the film. It's the after the plane crash, we cut to what I think what Timo was describing, like the reportage, the press pool spooling up, and it's all the lights coming on in the offices.
Oh my god! And we
Because you start on like a completely black screen, and then a light comes on, and another, and then like coming on like two or three at a time,
and it's
then
like
you get to
10
the dimension of this
stories of a building.
Yeah. This dimension of this giant skyscraper, this media empire that's like it's literally a metaphor for like the media spooling up around this thing, giving you dimension and size to how big this story is going to be, how many people are reporting on it. Great shot, great visual storytelling.
What do you?
There. Second one,
go ahead.
Is maybe one of the craziest moments of the entire film that feels very far divorced from the standard stock boardrooms that we're in for a lot of it, is when we scrambled like the
Yeah, I was thinking
Yugoslavian
you were
fighter
going to say
jets.
this one. Yeah, the fighter, and it's like he like calls them. He's like, "Give me the phone," and he gets on the radio.
Give me the prime
He's
minister of
like,
Yugoslavia.
we're not stopping. And then he's like, "But we have to. They're telling me." No, my friend, I know the guy who's in charge of this place. We're not stopping. Just
Okay.
call him that. And then they fly away.
Yeah.
I mean, illustrates it.
Enrico Mattei, he's a big swinging dick in the
he's
political
a
world.
bigwig.
He's like, call off your goddamn fighter jets. I got a meeting to get
Okay,
to.
but also like, how did they shoot that again? Like, not to be all geeking out on the production of this movie, but like, we got 3 jets in the air, and we're in one, and we're filming the other 2 all around, and it ain't no Top Gun Maverick with all this fancy CGI hidden throughout it. There's none of that. Like, cool. That's just cool.
Yeah.
I also just want to note, I'm kind of running out of things to say, to be honest, but I think there's an important dimension of his character that we haven't quite addressed, which is the fact that oil is just his hobby.
Or so he says.
Fishing is his real job.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
fishing
see.
is his real job.
That's true. That's a
And
good
I think
point.
it was disappointing that we didn't see more fishing in the movie.
Yeah, I
there was
mean, they
one
tell
moment.
us that fishing is his main job.
Yeah.
You see so much of this guy's hobby. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's kind of like how American Psycho is mostly about him murdering people and not being an ad executive. It's super weird.
The one kind of thought that I've got lingering here is in regards to the media, and it's not really expanded upon a ton in this film, or I think it is in a very subtextual and hard to read way about his influence, not just on the geopolitical stage, but in the media, in that he starts his own newspaper to control his own image, apparently.
Yeah.
And we spend
There's another Tell Don't show.
yeah, I don't see any effects
What
of
about
that.
when they show you all the boxes that he has of like, hey, this is all the bad reporting that all the hit pieces that I've had put out on me.
Well, actually, that's an interesting point because I tied those 2 moments kind of in my mind of the impact of media, the spread of how many people are covering him from both perspectives, and I was like, oh, to be honest, I can't remember which moment came first. The him saying he's starting his own newspaper, or that moment where they're looking at like the breadth of articles that have been written about him. But another problem I have with this movie, and a reason I find it's very hard to follow and get engaged with, is this is a very scrambled movie. We have actually yet to mention structure of this film. This is a jumpy, aroundy film, and most sequences aren't actually connected to the one that precedes them narratively, and we're jumping between times, like a 10-year time
we
span.
skip around decades at a time.
Yeah.
There's a moment where there's the plane crash, and then you see like him in the 60s, like days before the plane crash, and then we jump back to the 40s without listen. We're dumb Americans. We need title cards for when we're going back in time.
I can't tell what decade it is by the ties that they're wearing.
I can't. For all I know, they still drive giant iron boxy black cars in Italy. I don't know.
Yeah.
No, but I think that the fact that this movie, time-wise and structure-wise, is very scrambled, that certainly can contribute to a lot of confusion on my end. And also, given that Enrico Mattei is the only character of any particular importance in this movie. And
there's
so
no
The
one-
only character that I can
so
connect the name to the face of?
yeah, absolutely.
I want
But
to point out.
Yeah.
Sorry, just quickly. This is funny in pointing to what you. Just a funny fact. On Letterboxd, the second build actor, who we've said a couple times now in description of this film, Luigi Squarzina, is credited as lowercase L liberal journalist. They didn't. I mean, this is a TMDB issue largely, but the second build actor is just descriptor liberal journalist, also not uppercase.
Yeah. I mean, it is. I think to my earlier point of feeling like this film was entirely unapproachable. The fact that I'm going to say no characters get like real characterization, and there's not really any character dynamics to speak of or character arcs to speak of. These are things that are very important to me as a film goer to associate my brain to the stakes, to even if I don't fully understand something, if there's a character who I understand their motivation of, I can then attach myself to their goals, and then that can kind of branch me out into other things. This film makes it very difficult for me to motivate me to understand this world and the politics and the impact these things are having, because I don't know any of the characters. The film keeps them at an arm's length, and within its structure, it keeps everyone else around Mattei so scrambled, and I don't know who's his friend, I don't know who's his enemy, I don't know where they're from, I don't know how long he's known them, because we're jumping sequence to sequence, time period to time period, person to person, sequences with people that I could not tell you if we see them again in the movie, before or after, because the film is this big slurry of different shoppy time periods and sequences.
Remember when we see his wife, and then at the beginning of the movie, and then never again?
No, I didn't remember that.
There's the point. Like it has this like Jackie Kennedy opening where it's like you find out that your husband's been killed, and I'm like, oh, well, there's an interesting frame narrative. Like, how does it impact her? Like, I assumed, frankly, at that moment that the movie was going to be a lot about her looking into her husband's death and how that was going to go. We never see her again. Big missed opportunity, in my opinion.
I think if I could really chop it up to something, I think it's just because there is no other movie like the Mattei Affair that I've come to know of, where it is striking this balance that I've already described between biopic and film investigation and documentary. Like, it's very jarring and very filmically, formally interesting to have the director of the film jump in the middle of it while making the movie and be like, all right, so here's the skinny on this thing that just happened that is tied and connected to this case that I'm covering in this movie. Like, that doesn't happen. That's unlike anything else we've reviewed on the show or anything I've ever seen. And so, that the filmic form of this is entirely unique and is really one of one to Rossi's vision. And I was reading through some articles. I did find it, and he has a quote here that is connected to sort of generally it sounds like our issues with the lack of personality or background of Mattei, and is a conscious decision on his point, because Rossi himself once said, quote, "In the general economy of stories, personal lives are of no real importance." And that is something that is just so far separate from most filmmakers that you would encounter.
Yeah. And I think that explains why we don't know anything about what this guy is like, or, his kind of personality beyond the business. I mean, could be the argument that there really isn't that, and that for this guy, he professes it to be a hobby, but it is so all-encompassing in his life. He describes, I need the nice private jet because tonight I've got to be down in Africa, and then a couple hours later I have to be in the Middle East, and then the next day
and at the same
I've got to be...
he is taking the private cars away from the other executives at E&I.
Yeah.
He's a man who, I said it already, but like he is like a hypocrite in a lot of ways. I mean, he is obsessed with business, or he contains multitudes is maybe a better way to describe it. He is obsessed with like the business and has no real political affiliation, but at the same time will go on these long, seemingly left-wing tirades about dethroning American interests in oil in the Middle East and everything like that. And he demands a private jet while also cutting down on the bureaucracy in private cars, because that's not how the Americans do it. But also, what is more American than having a private jet?
Well, he's very image obsessed, because his rationale for removing the cars and getting the best jet is almost one and the same. It's projecting an image. Their executives don't, so our executives won't. The jet is not as good as Rockefeller's; it's better. It's the best jet. It has he can radio into his offices, and I think that this image of charisma is very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, we talk about how this is he says some based things in this, but he does not have an end goal of like nationalizing all oil industry. He's mostly just like, my job is to make sure that Italy is energy independent and a major player globally in oil and energy. And so I'm going to use the tools at my disposal, which are limited because of the American dominance here, to get us to that position, to get us to the level of an American oil privately owned company, with the image, with being a wheeler and a dealer, while also using back channels and political things. One of the best quotes I do want to shout out before we end is when somebody questions him about his political affiliations, how he works with communists and fascists and radicals. And he says, oh gosh, where is it? Political parties are like a taxi. I get in, I pay the fare, and I get out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's also this notion that I found compelling that at the beginning of the film, his organization is supposed to be liquidated. The sort of first major conflict in the net. Well, I guess first major conflict is his death, but I guess if we put that to the side for a second, it's this,
the conflict is between him and gravity.
it's this notion that of liquidating AGIP, and part of the conversation he has with this person he's trying to get a loan from to, keep possession of the corporation is this notion that, this is a fascist enterprise. They talk about the business as being fascist and that both being...
They say that Italian energy independence is a Mussolini myth.
Yeah.
And I think this dovetails nicely with what you're saying, this sort of political opportunism, this notion that it's, you want to sell the thing because it's fascist. And then he says, well, interestingly, this fascist thing I should sell because that's the right thing to do. Everybody wants to buy for a lot of money. I think that this film is actually quite complicated politically, and I like that. And at the same time, though, I think that it feels so impressive to pull off because it's also such a spontaneously made film. It goes back to what I was mentioning before. DeMoro, I don't know how to pronounce his name.
Yeah, the journalist that is killed.
Again, killed in the process of researching for this film. There is such an interesting sequence where we're walking with an expert on behaviors of the mafia, and he addresses to the camera what it's like to link a crime to the mafia, and the tells to that effect. That's a very interesting idea, not just that we're addressing the camera, but that we're addressing the camera about ways to reach some sort of conclusion in a crime that was being litigated for decades after this movie even came out. This trial was going on as late as 2015, I was reading.
Yeah. I think they eventually did. I was also looking at this. They settled on calling Mattei's death a homicide, but named no instigators or whatever.
Perpetrator.
Thank you.
Well, hope that doesn't happen to me.
Let's hope.
Same.
I'm
just looking to look if I
don't have good news.
Let's do a quick whip around. Would you go trout fishing with Mattei?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I
That's
would.
his job. He's really good at it.
Yeah.
He's a pro.
I would too. I mean, I haven't
you go
fished for a better part of a decade.
Drilling.
I haven't fished for over a decade, I should say.
I was fishing yesterday, bro.
Well, it just shows the difference between Tanner and Tino, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Tucker, the answer is no, I would not go fracking.
You would not go.
Would you go on a fracking date with Enrico Mattei?
I suppose they probably do. Was fracking invented yet?
No.
Who did the biopic about the guy who invented fracking?
He's some crazy.
Now here's a question:
North Dakota guy.
Do we think Enrico Mattei would be a big fracker? Like he'd be like,
I think he would frack.
Yeah,
no question about it.
He's drill baby drill.
Yeah, he is drill baby drill personified.
Could you generate the amount of PSI needed to frack in this time in world history?
That I have no clue.
It's the 70s. It's the 60s.
I don't think so.
They had industry.
Maybe they had pipes.
Yeah, but fracking, the PSI of that water is so crazy.
I don't even know.
Well, you just need to teleport me back and just make me drink a ton of water.
Oh, you pee hard enough to start fracking.
All I know is that 60 years of oil extraction in West Texas is causing some major environmental problems these days with saline water spouts pouring out of the ground that nobody really knows where that saline water's coming from. And it's turning the land completely sour and bad. So,
it is really funny watching a movie about oil now.
Yeah, you're like oil sucks, man.
Yeah. Well, I do. Last thing I want to mention, and this is what I was sort of jumping the gun on Timo earlier. I heard the word crash, and I was like, oh, the 1973 OPEC oil crisis. Is that what you're talking about, Timo?
Tell us about this, Tanner.
Is that
because
what
how do you think
about?
This factors into
Tucker? Yes.
this movie?
Yay!
Well, it's obviously very prescient. This movie came out in 1972, and then
a year later,
the OPEC oil crisis, happened a year later.
And then Licorice Pizza came out in 2020.
This happens during the plot of Licorice Pizza, where essentially OPEC, which is a conglomeration, essentially the seven sisters that he's referring to, these oil-producing nations in the Middle East.
America has never
Not
been
America.
part of OPEC.
They come together and they're like, hey, we're pissed at America, obviously. So we're going to embargo, or no, is the embargo...
Well,
You got
is the
this,
embargo
buddy.
done by OPEC, or is it done by another country?
I think it was done by OPEC.
OPEC's not a country.
OPEC's like 7 countries.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, OPEC is a collection of countries. Hang on. Essentially, they're like, we're not going to sell oil to America anymore, and so the price of oil in America like tripled. And gas was super expensive. There was a run on it, and there was a gas shortage in America and everything like that.
Well, good thing there's been no recent political decisions that will make gas more expensive or harder to come by in the United States of America anytime soon.
Oh, okay. Here, October 1973, OPEC announced that it was implementing a total oil embargo against countries that had supported Israel at any time during the 1973 Yom Kippur War.
Oh, so it's even more complicated than they were just pissed at America.
Yes. It is also involved in Israel's place in the Middle
relations.
East.
Okay, great.
Uh-huh.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Hey, wait, did they make this movie today?
Well, they could.
They couldn't make this movie today.
They couldn't make this movie.
No.
They should make the Mattei Affair about the designer in Japan who made those roads that generate electricity when you walk on them.
Yeah. Or what about the guy who figured out how to build an engine that ran on water who mysteriously died?
When I was a kid, I always thought, like, why doesn't everything generate some electricity? Like, why don't we have, like, a little thing that you put on, like, your water spout that, like, the turbine, like, generates some, like, batteries you can charge your phone, or, like the door hinges, or, like, I don't know, when your cat runs around. Like,
Yeah,
I was like, come on, like, make everything.
Yeah,
make
when
a
are we
little
getting
energy.
harvesting kinetic
When are we
electricity?
getting
Tucker, there's a
electric
red
cats?
dot on your forehead. I don't know if you want to do something about that.
This is an idea I had when I was, like, 6 years old. I was reading,
Oh,
like,
sure.
a National Geographic Kids, and it was like, oh, this is how, like, solar energy and kinetic energy works. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
why doesn't everything just do that?
That's a good question. It's because they don't want it to.
You guys think we're done on the Mattei Affair?
I do have.
I think so.
I do, because this film is so politically unique. I want to know what you guys think. Why they picked it for the Palme d'Or as a. Why they picked this movie?
It's split.
Okay.
Yeah, can I read you the title of the movie that it's split
Sure.
with? Because
Yeah.
I think this will
Yeah.
enlighten us. So in 1972, the grand prize at the Cannes Film Festival was split between the Mattei Affair and also The Working Class Goes to Heaven.
Sure. So the Palme d'Or committee was pretty much riding the hog of leftism in the 70s.
Also, that movie, The Working Class Goes to Heaven, also led by Jean-Marie Volonté.
The same guy.
He's the lead actor.
Yeah, same guy.
Lead actor in both films.
They were in love. That's all we can say.
That's a power couple.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Himself and himself.
I think that explains it. I mean,
I think that pretty much explains it. Yeah, they were getting woke in
they were
1972.
getting woke at Cannes.
Not
Let's
possible. That was the past.
let's score
Not possible.
this. Let's score
Didn't
this.
happen
Film.
back then.
Okay.
Oh God, I don't have the sheet pulled up. Do the
That's
palm
okay.
details.
Palme d'Or. So in 1972, I already
It's
mentioned
okay.
that
It's
this
our
film
first
was
time doing this.
splitting the Palme d'Or with The Working Class Goes to Heaven, also an Italian film starring Jean-Marie Volonté. Notable members of the jury this year included Milos Forman,
Milos
who
Forman.
we've reviewed one of his films
Two of
on
them.
a previous version of Quest. Two?
Yeah. Amadeus and
Oh, Amadeus was Milos
Before
as well.
Goes
I forgot about that.
two-time Quest alumnus.
Yes, that's right. And the jury president this year was Joseph Losey.
Okay.
Or Losey? Which one is it?
I don't know.
LOSY, Losey.
Okay.
Hmm.
Yeah.
When I think of Milos, I think of the tennis player at the pro shop in Seinfeld.
Mhm. I see.
I'm sure you do, buddy.
Director of The Go-Between, by the way, is
Oh.
Joseph Losey. or
Oh,
Losey.
okay. So,
Yeah.
so the go-between got a 4.2
That's why I don't remember him.
on our ranking. But,
It did.
well, I'm just
and other films in competition that year amongst the 23 others that did not win the Palme d'Or.
I have a feeling I'm going to be
included-
mad when you list these.
Not really. Oh well,
Okay.
there's a very well respected film here. Images by Robert Altman, Slaughterhouse 5, an adaptation of that Kurt Vonnegut book by George Roy Hill, and the one that is
Roy Hill.
I watched long years ago. I probably am due on a rewatch for this because my tastes have improved. I would say is
What?
Andrei Tarkovsky's Solaris.
Oh, Solaris.
Oh, Solaris is sick.
Solaris
dude.
is
Well, actually,
sick.
I'm gonna be honest. I've only seen the Soderbergh one, but
Yeah.
I like that movie a
You've
lot.
not seen the
Sure.
well.
The Tarkovsky one? No, I've seen the
Tucker,
I've seen the Soderbergh one.
take some caffeine pills before you watch that movie because it is a slow, but it's great.
Yeah.
But yes, those are the Palm details. So shall we do it,
Mhm.
gentlemen?
We shall do
I
it.
shall.
I'm ready. I think we're just waiting on old Tan Man over here.
I got it.
Okay, 3, 2, 1, go.
Bang.
Okay, we've got a score. It is not a tie. It's a 5.5. So just a bit over half. That is going to rocket the film to below Dumbo. But at spot number 30, the point breakdown is Tucker gave it a 3.7. I gave it a 4.5. Abram gave it a 6.8. And Tanner gave it a 6.9. So a little bit of a split there, but that is going to result in a 5.5 going right there
Yeah.
in between
Yes.
Dumbo and The Silent World. So the two documentary-ish movies on this list go right next to each other because they both have some rather
Yeah,
questionable
sure.
elements.
Interesting. Hey, we'll get to more. We will get to more, won't we?
Oh, yes, we will. And I think without
I thought
any
If was a documentary.
further ado, it's
And we're
time.
yes.
It's time.
I always like to say that we're recording this towards the end of 2024 here, so we're coming towards Oscar season, and I always like to say, oh, only a couple more before we take a break. And Tucker pointed out the other day that I call it a break, but it is more work on our part.
It's
Yeah.
kind of the
It is-
opposite of a break, actually.
Yeah, it's regularly recording 2 episodes a week, but that time's coming up. It's a
we
good
love
time.
it.
It's a time that I
we
like
love
to
the
talk.
best pictures, don't we?
Yeah, that's right. That's
All right.
We love
Our
them, folks. We
one
love the best
original
picture
love.
nominees, don't we?
Tanner, you're just going to have to cue me because I can't show it to you on this, but our viewers
Oh,
will be
sure.
able to watch the spin wheel just fine.
Okay. Wheel, what's your deal? Give us a movie that makes us squeal. Is it on digital or is it on real? Wheel, what's your deal?
Oh, and Wheel's deal is number 27.
27 is going to be, oh, close. We're staying in the early 70s here. Nearly got The Working Class Goes to Heaven, but no, we are going to stick in the year 1970 with a film starring some big old names here. Let's see if you guys can guess which film this is from 1970. Robert Duvall, Sally Kellerman, Tom Skerritt, Elliot Gould, and Donald Sutherland, directed by Robert Altman. This is MASH.
MASH.
God damn it.
The MASH movie about Korea?
The MASH
The MASH
movie.
affair?
Okay. I don't really know
Yeah.
much about this. I've watched a good number of MASH episodes, but
Yeah, my babysitter always used to watch MASH. She was quite old.
I'm
but
really
the TV show, not the film.
I guess we're gonna. I'm looking forward to seeing how similar
Now-
the Korea landscape in this movie looks to Southern California, because in the TV show, it just looks like Southern California.
They didn't film in Korea.
I wonder how they did that. How'd they achieve that effect, Timo?
Yeah.
I don't know. I
Um,
don't know.
Tucker and I watched this film together some years ago.
We both hated
And
it.
yeah, well, I am not a fan of MASH, but hey, maybe it'll be better this time around. But I am not currently a fan.
Yeah, I mean,
of
your
film MASH.
taste has improved or whatever it is you said earlier.
Yeah. I've matured.
Toured.
Weird.
Well,
Yeah, you're almost as old as your babysitter now.
That's true. I'm watching my good friends Hawkeye and Radar every week.
okay. Well, join us next time to talk about 1970s MASH, the Korean War film. Tanner and Tucker gave us a little preview to expect a raucous episode next time.
It is a comedy.
Okay. We'll see if
Yeah.
that holds
No,
up.
we don't-
We'll see
we don't get a whole lot of
if
those.
This movie is woke or not, like this one was.
Sure.
Not bad
Sure.
We're gonna have to add a new scoring metric to all the Quest movies, the woke scale.
Wokeometer.
Write down below if you think that's a good idea.
We'll
or
leave
not.
that to
Multiplier,
the
not
comments,
woke-
believe me.
The Wokeplier. Okay,
Oh,
all right.
God. Hey, let's end the episode. Let's wrap it up.
We got to get out of here.
He makes YouTube videos.
Stick around, Backlot Banter, for all the movie content you know and love and desire. And we'll be here next time to talk about MASH. That's all for me. Stay cool. Keep warm. Peace. I gotta get this fire stoked up. I don't want a dead fire in my background.
Stuff. And if
What
you
do you
get
have on your
the
neck,
if you get the
fucking
mix
pervert?
right, you just get like a hint of that spice of the fireball. Oh my god.
Are there corn? Are you gonna eat corn with those? What?
I don't know.